We will still give everyone another minute to get here, but if you just got in, please copy down what's in blue. We're continuing the notes from yesterday, same focus question. Okay, so let's get started. So we looked at yesterday how the soldiers fight, and we will continue to look at how some of the soldiers fight yesterday with the trench warfare. But we want to break down this word civilian. When someone's a civilian in a war, civilian means someone not a soldier. As I'm putting in the chat, not a soldier. So when you're a civilian in a war, you're someone who's not really fighting for the army, though you may be a part of a country. World War I goes just beyond us sending troops out to fight. World War I is such an incredibly large war that it almost takes pretty much all of the people in the United States to contribute in some way. It's very similar to COVID, where like everyone kind of has to contribute to keep everyone safe, whether it's wearing a mask or social distancing. Civilians were expected during World War I and then eventually, obviously, World War II to help out and contribute in any way they could. So if you weren't able to be a soldier and go fight overseas, there were many things you could do to kind of support the war effort. Okay? So let's talk about what that means. So World War I was a total war. So all of the Americans, even the ones not fighting, contributing to winning this war. And when I say total war, that means that civilians can be killed in war. All the damage that's done can be done to regular people. All right. Usually, most wars are just soldiers versus soldiers, but in a total war, there are innocent people that are going to be killed. Now, if you're living in the United States, was that a worry? Not really, because most of the fighting took place in Europe. But if you lived in France, if you lived in Germany, if you lived in Britain or Russia, it was dangerous. All right, especially in France, where a lot of the fighting in World War I took place, a lot of civilians ended up being killed, innocent people. Okay, it just a bomb, okay, got the wrong way, a bullet got the wrong way. This becomes even worse in World War II when they literally start taking over towns and cities where people live. Okay, World War II doesn't even, World War I doesn't even compare to World War II in terms of civilian casualties or people that died that were innocent. Okay, so what were some ways if you were living at home in 1917, 1918 that you could help out and contribute? Okay, and some of these things will be similar when we get to World War II, but I want to touch on it for the first time now. The first thing to do was ration. Yes, Casanova?
I feel like I would just give away canned beans, because I know a lot of soldiers probably would be hungry or something.
Right. Well, it's not necessarily going to go outside your house and give it to the soldiers, but yeah, you could definitely help out by giving food or candy or drinks or supplies. And that goes into our first word, which is rationing. Okay. There is only so much food in the United States. There is only so much supplies in the United States. And our goal is to try and create as much supplies as possible. But until then, you need to ration. Okay, and what that means is only having a fixed amount of food or a resource so the soldiers could have the rest shipped out to them. The very beginning of COVID in March, there was a shortage in paper towels and toilet papers and a couple of other cleaning products. People were advised to ration, not be wasteful with their paper towels, not be wasteful with their cleaning products like hand sanitizer, okay, things along those lines. People were expected to ration, all right, or only having a fixed or small amount of stuff. And the idea was, okay, let's take paper towels, okay, because that's something that could definitely happen. People were expected to say, okay, we want you to use half of the amount of paper towels you use in a given week. What we want you to do is anything that's extra, please send to the War Department so we can send it over to the soldiers so they can have whatever they want, whether it's food, whether it's supplies, so they have a much better way of life around them. They're fighting this very tough war. We saw what the trenches were like, right? It's no joke yesterday. You want them to be as comfortable as possible. And if that means people at home have to do a little bit less, you know, eat a little less food, have a little less supplies, and be generous and send it out to the rest of the soldiers, that would be the way to do it. So that is known as rationing. You will see this word a lot more in World War II, but I'm introducing it to you now. Okay? Now, I believe in this class, please write in the chat if we have discussed having a military draft at some point. I believe we have back during the Civil War, but maybe not, because I get confused with the regions sometimes, because I've definitely done it with them. We talked about having a military draft.
A military draft. Dang.
Okay. So one says yes, one says no. All right. So let's just re-go over it just in case. Okay. In our country, okay, we've already talked about militarism backing up for other countries. Now, other countries, when a male turned 18, they would be drafted into this military for 5 to 10 years. We do not do that. We only have a draft if a war is bad enough, meaning we need more soldiers. So you have two different types of people. Okay, you have volunteer soldiers, okay, and drafted soldiers. So volunteer soldiers are people who choose to sign up and go fight for America in a war. Okay, and what we do is every time we go to a war, we say, okay, do we have enough volunteer soldiers? And 90% of the time, the answer is yes. We have enough people in our military already where we don't really need to go and get other soldiers. Okay? But other soldiers, okay, are called drafted soldiers if a war is bad enough. Okay? So we're talking the Civil War was one. World War I, World War II, the Vietnam War. If a war is bad enough where we need more soldiers, we have to have a military draft. Now, for my males in here, just listen carefully, okay? Any male or female can be a volunteer soldier. Anyone can do it. But only right now, as of 2021, only males, if you turn 18, can be drafted, okay? So I'm going to share something with you quickly. Give me a second to just pull it up. Draft card. I'm 18 years old. Give me 1 second. Just give me 1 second here, guys. I want this is gonna be something that boys in this class will have to fill out. Okay, so well, it's a little tough to tell, but I know we're not so zoomed in here. But if you zoom in, in this circle here, it says selective service system. When you turn 18, okay, every male has to sign up for the selective service. So if there is a bad enough war, you can be selected and chosen and drafted to go to war. Okay? If you get selected to go to the draft, Jaden, but you don't go, then you could be sent to jail for a long period of time. It's called draft dodging. Okay? So this is why it's very important to stay on top of current events to make sure that, you know, we're peaceful with other countries, we're not going to war, because it is possible that, especially as a male in this class, that you can go to war. Okay? It is a real thing. All right? So understand that many wars where we had a draft, many soldiers were okay with going because the war was very important, but obviously it's a very big sacrifice you have to make. So in World War I, okay, there was a military draft because we needed more soldiers. We didn't have enough volunteer soldiers. So males aged 21 to 30 were selected and drafted to go fight in World War I. All right, I'm loving the chat talking, but make sure that you are focused on this so you completely understand. Now, in this year, it can be from 18 to 30. They lowered the age to 18 during the Vietnam War. Okay? I've often sometimes heard some of the males in class, you know, say, how come women, you know, don't get drafted? I think that is a good argument, but the idea is that we have enough men to serve in the military, so they want to.
Mr. Panio?
Yes.
Can I talk to you?
Mm-hmm.
Muhammad Ali.
Yes.
Like Muhammad Ali.
Like
Get it?
Muhammad, like the name Muhammad. What about him?
Penyo, I dropped in the chat article that
Dude, it's a
Muhammad Ali
joke.
did
It's a joke.
draft dodging because he didn't want to serve in World War II. He didn't see why he should go over there and be a part of the war. So if you read the article, he actually did time for not obliging to the draft.
How long ago was that? Like, how long did it take?
Well, you're going to read the article after class. I'm sorry, Penyo. I just wanted to give him an example of it.
Sure. Yeah, Muhammad Ali is a great example for World War II of someone who was drafted but chose not to go to the draft. So you can definitely take a look at that. We'll actually discuss him more when we get to Unit 6. We get to World War II, but same concept. Okay, we're having a military draft for World War I. So a lot of soldiers were forced to go fight overseas, which is obviously a very scary thing. You know, picture walking through the trenches like yesterday. Don't worry about what's in black. You don't have to write that down. But many African Americans and women. Yes, Jane, you have a question? I'm sorry.
I raised my hand to say something. The fact
Go ahead.
that women aren't allowed to be drafted in the war is pretty sexist, and the people that won't let them be drafted in the war are very stereotypical. I don't like those type of people that are very stereotypical.
Okay.
I disagree.
Let me
disagree.
let me clarify one thing.
Yeah, they can be very
Hey.
stereotypical and view them as
Go.
stereotypes.
Let me clarify one thing, and then I'll let you guys respond. Women can still go to war. They can volunteer to go to war, but they will not be forced to go to war. So I want to make that clear. Women could go fight in the war. There's no one stopping them, but they are not required to be drafted. Okay, so Shanika, you want to respond? Go ahead.
Yeah, I feel like, cause like the things like men, like the way I look at it, like male, like they're more like strong, like they're more like they can handle the roughness, but like women they get kind of
vulnerable.
soft sometimes. So that's
Yes,
why.
there's definitely women that can handle that fighting, but yeah, it may be more suited for men, some would say. But you know, plenty of people could disagree with that statement. Say there's plenty of women that can handle it, and sure, the important thing is they can. It's just not that they're required. And Casanova, what do you have to say?
Nah, yeah, I'm basically just saying the same thing you're saying. They don't really have to go, like they're not forced to. But
Right.
if they chose to volunteer to go to war, then that's totally them.
Absolutely. So I want to make that abundantly clear.
Also brought up, she was like, men are also stronger, but I was trying to say like women are strong too. It's not just like men are not strong.
Mhm.
Women are just weak. No, it's not what it is.
Right.
They're strong too. So it makes it seem like they think that it's weak, but they're not.
Yeah, this is a very controversial topic, and that people are going to have a lot of differing opinions. Some people believe, there's this huge push for women's rights over the last 100 years. There's been a huge push, and a lot of people say, well, okay, women want full equality, and a lot of people agree, but, we kind of don't let them get drafted, and maybe we should let them get drafted, go through the same thing, men do from that aspect. But then some people will say no. So it's a debated thing. It's not something we need to figure out this second, but I think it's something you could start thinking about what your points are. Justin, can you actually change the gender you identify with? Being transgender at this point, I don't have an answer because back in the last time we had the draft in the 1960s, there wasn't too many transgender people that were open about it. So I don't know the answer to that question. I do know of one of my college professors who was transgender, did fight in the Vietnam War, was a male, but later on in life started to transition to a female. I will say that during the war, though, and if you transition or try and transition, I don't know how that will work. I couldn't begin to tell you. I would tend to think that many people could pull that. But if you're doing it to avoid a war, it seems like a kind of hurtful thing to do if you're not being truly honest about, what you identify with, I would say. So if you're doing it to avoid a war and doing it to kind of be mean or a little bit fishy with stuff, I don't know. I think that's a weird way of, doing it, but it is probably a loophole, Justin, that you can maybe get away with. All right. The last thing I want to talk about is the Liberty or the war bonds. Basically, one of my favorite things about World War I and World War II, basically, if people just wanted to donate, okay, if you guys know what GoFundMe is, okay, if you want to just give to charity, there was a way where you could say, you know what, I know I can't fight. Maybe you're a female who doesn't want to go. Maybe you're a male who's a little older. Maybe you have a condition where you can't go fight, but you really want to contribute to the war effort. You can donate money. You could buy something what's called a war bond. Looks like this, okay? It says, if you can enlist, invest, buy a Liberty bond. All right, defend your country with your dollars. Then obviously you buy that, you get one of the posters. A big thing a lot of people walked around with is like a pin that said, I own a Liberty bond. So after they bought a Liberty bond, they get a pin and walk around with it to show that they contributed.
Yeah,
Like-
I see it before. Yeah.
Yeah, like the modern day version of like when people vote or people do something, they post it to their Instagram
I
story.
voted,
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
Right. It's for people to show that they're contributing in some way. So you could buy these Liberty bonds. And one of my favorite things is people raised $21 billion in war bonds. That means people donated $21 billion in their money, more than half of the $40 billion war costs, so our soldiers can go out there and fight. Okay? So let me try and catch up with the chat here. Yeah, if they catch you for trying to lie or trying to dodge a draft, you will go to jail. But listen, guys, that's not something you really, really have to worry about. It's just something you have to understand that can happen. So it's important to stay on top of current events and know what's going on. All right.
They can't draft you if you're the only boy, though, right? Like, if you're the only boy in your immediate family.
Not true. They could draft you, sure.
But isn't that cut off a bloodline?
One at a time. Brandon, go ahead.
Isn't that like cutting off a generation in a bloodline? Can't they do that?
You can still do it.
What? They capping.
One of the movies we'll show you when we get to World War II is Saving Private Ryan, which is a movie about 5 of the same brothers all going to war. The Ryan brothers, they're called. And basically 4 of the 5 die. And they want to keep that last one alive, but all 5 of them get drafted. You know, it doesn't stop. It's all by luck or chance or unluckiness. All right, we'll watch that when we get to World War II. That's a hell of a movie.
And I think that's a great point because I think that is a cultural thing. I know with Albanians, if there's one son, they do not let them go.
Okay, 04, 24.
So Brandon, that's a great
5.
point that you mentioned that.
04, 24, 505, 603.
What was that, Sebastian? I didn't understand.
Listen, what are the numbers?
Oh, that's don't worry about that. Okay, so a big thing we're going to focus on before the end of class, before you guys start your assignment today, is I want to talk about a little bit. We talked about trench warfare. We now know how a lot of the soldiers fight. We saw the tank yesterday. We saw the artillery. We've already seen the U-boats. All right, I really want to focus in on one last thing. I want to focus in on chemical warfare. Chemical warfare made World War I one of the worst wars in American world history. This warfare, this type of warfare, was so incredibly bad, it actually became illegal. There's actually things that are illegal in wars, and chemical warfare or using mustard gas, okay, is one of them. All right, Casanova and James, just stop in the chat and focus here. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to show you a video on how the chemical warfare kind of works, okay? And then from there, you guys are going to get into your assignment where you're going to go more over the weapons and understanding more of how the fighting took place. All right, so let me pop this open. Give me 1 second. They killed a lot more than dogs, Jaden. They killed human beings. Okay, so you're going to look at 2 types of gases. You're going to look one called chlorine gas and one called mustard gas. Both are very bad in their own way, and both were used during World War I, okay, and during the trench warfare. So you'll see how this kind of breaks down.
In 1914, a chemist called Fritz Haber offered his knowledge to the German army. He soon began experimenting with chlorine gas to be used in trench warfare. In April of 1915, 150 tons of lethal chlorine gas was used by the German forces against the French army at Ypres. The French soldiers witnessed yellow lime clouds with a distinctive smell of pineapple and pepper slowly drifting toward their trenches. The French infantry assumed that the Germans were merely using a smokescreen at first, until they started to complain about pains in their chest and a burning sensation in their throats. As the realization of a gas attack became apparent, the French ran away from the area, putting a gap in the Allied line. The German army was hesitant to advance forward due to concerns of what the chlorine gas would do to them. This enabled Canadian and British troops to recapture the position before German forces could break through. Chlorine gas would destroy the respiratory organs of the unfortunate victim and lead to a slow death by asphyxiation. Weather was an important factor in gas.
Okay, so if you saw in the back there, at the back of the trench, you have the artillery shells. And those artillery shells, instead of launching bombs, the Germans decided we're going to start launching poisonous gas. So they started launching the artillery shells. They released this poisonous gas to the opposite trench. Okay?
Well,
And this,
well,
go ahead,
that's
Sebastian.
very, but that is very gassy. Getting
All right.
gassy. 'Cause
So I need
gas-
a huge favor, Sebastian. We're talking about World War I, where over 10 million people died. I think all of us can really do without the jokes, you know, because I understand it can be funny, but I don't find this topic to be too funny. Right? We need to be
Fine.
sure.
Mr. S. Well, Mr. Panio.
Yes.
Is it true that mustard gas makes actual legit acid in your lungs?
Basically,
Makes
Yeah.
it like the liquid in your lungs?
I'll let the video really go into it, but yes, that is pretty much correct. Okay, so a lot of people thought that this gas was like at first just like a smoke screen. Like, you know, if you guys play video games, you use a smoke grenade, you know, it's used to be like a distraction. But when they started smelling this stuff, they literally started asphyxiating and choking to death. And a lot of these people that smelled and inhaled this stuff died a very slow and painful death. Okay?
Well, what if they use gas masks?
That's what we're getting to. So this was the counteract to gas, was to make great gas masks. So you're going to see that come out for the first time.
Gas attacks. When the British Army launched a gas attack on the 25th September 1915, the wind blew it back into the faces of British troops. This was solved in 1916 when gas shells were used with heavy artillery, increasing the range of attack. So, how would you counter a gas attack? At first, Allied troops used cotton pad masks or even handkerchiefs that had been soaked in urine. The ammonia in the pad,
Alright,
it was discovered,
pause.
would neutralize the chlorine. As the war progressed, soldiers were
Pause.
equipped with gas masks and anti-asphyxiation respirators, which were more efficient means of protection from gas.
So they would pee on each other's like mask things. So,
They
like,
would. So if you didn't have a mask, if you didn't have a gas
So
mask,
that's clearly the grossest.
because I heard
I
that
ever
urine
heard.
helps with that, like helps with other things, especially like
Correct.
in fires and gas, things
Correct.
like that. They say that urine helps with breathing. So
correct, because of the ammonia. So it is a nasty, nasty thing, Sebastian, 100%. But this is life or death. So people have to make that tough decision. If they don't have a gas mask on them,
Well,
You think-
I think it's.
yes.
Well, I think it's both.
Well, I mean, if you had the choice of
No
being in a
spoilers.
war or surviving, right? This is a pretty big thing. All right, this is a pretty bad thing. All right, let's go into the assignment for today. Most of you will get close to finishing, maybe not all the way. Okay, but you have two things here. The first thing I want you to work on is the weapons portion of the assignment. So don't worry about number 7 at the top. You don't have to do it. Okay? I want you guys to read through some of these weapons, the artilleries, the poison gas, the armored tanks, the zeppelins, and answer questions 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. You're going to answer them on the Google Doc. Okay, I've already set that up for you. It says weapons of World War I. You just fill in 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. You're then going to go to the chemical warfare reading. 1 second, guys, and I'll explain, Jane. I'll open it up to questions. Once you go to the chemical warfare, you have a reading on that. It's going to go even further detail than what you saw in the video. It's going to go into the mustard gas a little bit more, and then you have some questions there. I don't know what happened to question 2 here, but this is 1, this is 2, this is 3, this is 4, this is 5, and 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, you're going to answer those as well. So you have 2 short readings that you're all going to answer on the Google Doc. Yes, Jane, what's your question?
What about the Zimmerman telegram?
What about it?
The one that you posted last time.
It should be done. We did a lesson on it, I think, 2 days ago now. So maybe you weren't here, but that should be done. You just turn it in.
Okay.
All right.